work on President Trump. The award was presented at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Trump was not in attendance. He is also the author of a new book, a fictional political thriller titled The Hellfire Club. The novel is set in early 1950s Washington at the height of McCarthyism. People often say that novels are in some way autobiographical, that you write about what you know. So in what sense is this, about what you know?
It's a great question. I think that it is an expression of concerns I have about Washington. The hero is a young Republican congressman, the Eisenhower era. He's a World War II hero and an academic who's kind of thrust into this world, and he and his wife experience a conspiracy. But one of the themes of the book is the compromises that the main character, Charlie Martyr, makes along the way. He comes to Washington to do good. He wants to be a good congressman. He wants to protect people. And little by little, bits of his soul are eroded by this system. And that's something that I've seen happen. A lot of people come to Washington to do good things. And they find themselves immersed in the swamp bit by bit. And next thing you know, they're in over their head and they lose themselves.
What do you think is the system that makes all this, all these good people turn bad? Is it partly pandering to special interests? Is it pandering to voters? How do you see, what is the perverse incentive that makes people make all these compromises?
I think the first one is money. Money really runs Washington. People's self-preservation is about getting campaign contributions and about big donations. So that's one. And two, a lot of people go down to Washington to do good, and then they ultimately end up getting trapped in the system, and they're all of a sudden, there are all these favors that they're getting, and all of a sudden they're living a lifestyle that they're not used to, and then preserving that, holding on to that power becomes more important than why they were sent there.
Now, you use the title, the Hellfire Club, comes from a British...
Well, you know this.
200-year-old society.
Yes.
But what I'm struck by is there was a great deal of personal immorality involved. That was part of the old Hellfire clubs.
It was obscene.
Right? So do you think that Washington actually has a lot of that, or is it actually quite staid and tame, certainly compared to the rumors of the old Hellfire Club?
It is hard to imagine that people can get away with the kind of bacchanal that the actual members of the 1700s Hellfire Club experienced. I mean, those were obscene. I can't even go into it on the show, but they're really obscene.
And it was, since they had that info on each other, and so there was a lot of kind of deterrence and
yes, exactly, mutually assured destruction. That this member of royalty would do what this nobleman wanted to do because they both had dirt on each other. That actually happened, as you know.
So at least have we progressed from that?
I don't know. I can't imagine that there aren't secret societies. I don't know of any. But I can't imagine, especially what...
Involving debauched sex? Washington seems so boring.
Well, I don't know that would be in Washington. Maybe that would be in Virginia. Maybe they drive a couple, or maybe they take a plane down to the Caribbean, to a private island. But knowing what we know about powerful, rich men, I can't believe that there isn't something like the Hellfire Club today. I don't know of anything.
But no one invited you?
I would never be invited, nor would you. But it's, I mean, I don't know of it. This is a fictional book, and in the flight of fancy is that the Hellfire Club from the 1700s in England is replicated in Washington, D.C. in the 1950s. But do you really think that it doesn't exist? Something like it? I mean, they're really all these rich, powerful men who are under more scrutiny today than they've ever been. And in the 50s, it was true, under more scrutiny then than they had ever been. You really think that there aren't places that they go and do things that they would love to do without cameras around, et cetera?
Is McCarthyism a parallel you intentionally wanted to draw to today? I mean, there are people who say after 9/11, the United States overreacted in many ways, just as it did in the 1950s.
Joe McCarthy and Donald Trump stand for very different things. But the techniques of Joe McCarthy, the smearing, the disregard for the truth, that's similar. And so when I wrote about that phenomenon, there were things that I wrote about with the perspective of 2018. And there's also this factual connective tissue. Joe McCarthy's protege, Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn's protege, Donald Trump. So there are similarities. Now, a Trump supporter might read the book and say this is the Washington swamp that Trump rails about, and he'd be right too.
The pervasive theme is the degree to which money corrupts, to which politics and lobbying and special interests are all in collusion. It's a pretty sad, cynical view of Washington.
It's I don't know if it's sad. I prefer to think of it as a fun and kind of vaguely disgusted view of Washington. But I think it expresses a lot of my feelings about Washington, about the compromises that one is forced to make. There's also the larger theme of what does McCarthy want to do to protect America? What compromises is he willing to make? What compromises is President Eisenhower willing to make in order to protect America from both the communists and from McCarthyism? So the question of compromises in an evil system